Hey,
Hello, how are you?
what's going on? I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, doing well.
All right. For everyone who is just tuning in, today is Mentorship Monday. I'm Claire Polka. I'm a mind. And if this is your first time tuning in, every Monday we here at Minds of Jamaica have what's called Mentorship Mondays, where we spotlight our different minds, our mentors, the awesome work that they're doing, their career paths, all of those fun things. So this week we have Michael Pitter, who's an immunologist at the University of Michigan. So that is like the brief bio, but he actually has a super interesting journey. So Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell people about kind of like your path and how you got to do the work that you're doing now.
Sure. So I guess I'm considered like a non-traditional student. I actually
Yeah.
started out in undergrad studying English and philosophy.
Yeah.
And so very much I took philosophy courses, literature courses, history, and I really enjoyed it. But after some time, I really wanted to do something that was a bit more universal, where like differences in language and culture could be transcended. And I enjoyed science. So I transitioned into the sciences. I took basic science classes after I graduated from undergrad. And I worked for a few years in a couple of different laboratories. I was able to co-author and publish a few papers. And then it made a lot of sense to go ahead and apply for a PhD program. And so I'm currently in my third year. I'll be approaching my third year in the fall, and time is going by kind of quickly. But I'm really enjoying it actually, and it's clear that it was the right choice that I made. So.
So what exactly does it mean to be an immunologist? What
So
is
yeah,
that
so yeah,
for us
so
laymen who are not in STEM?
mm, yeah, so basically, immunology it's a broad field.
Yeah.
So we study, basically an immunologist studies the immune system. There are many different ways of studying this, many different approaches. You have some people that focus on studying viruses. Our immune system protects your body from diseases like viral infections, bacterial infections, including cancers. So you have immunologists that focus in different areas of immunology. Me, I focus in cancer immunology, and so we look at basically how we can use the immune system to fight cancer cells. And so in particular, I study T cells, which which can fight and kill cancer cells. And so we work to kind of strengthen the ability of T cells in a cancer setting, in a clinical setting.
So you talked about this a little bit, but I think this is so important, like that kind of shift that you made from like liberal arts, from English and philosophy into a pretty hardcore like science career. So what did that transition look like exactly? Like you talked a little bit
Yeah.
about like working in labs, about taking some extra classes, but
Mhm.
like kind of walk me through the specifics of kind of what those steps looked like.
Sure. Previous to enrolling in the post baccalaureate program, where
Yeah.
I took the basic, so I just took biology, chemistry,
Yeah.
organic chemistry, and physics, like
Hmm.
1 and 2 of each of those classes. But before entering into the science classes, I hadn't taken any science classes. The only science classes I took were maybe they were biological anthropology and geology, and these are
Oh
just
wow.
requirements for undergrad.
Yeah.
So yeah, so but at the same time, I had science in my family. Also, my father he was an engineer and was a surgeon, then became a surgeon afterwards. And I grew up with doctors and scientists around me. My aunt
Hmm.
is a scientist as well, and so I always had that influence. And at the same time, as I pursued the liberal arts, I still had that drive to want to explore and create new things and use my creativity. And so I could take these faculties and use them in science as well. and basically it just required me having to go back and read a lot of chemistry, and you have to memorize a lot of things. There's a lot of like brunt work. There's a lot of like hard work that you have to do. But once you kind of like finish that period, you can really apply like the things that you want to know and understand. You can take all the tools that you've learned and apply it to discover something new. But at the same time, it was tough. I mean, like, for example, writing, I was used to like more liberal arts type of writing, whereas in science, you have to do science writing. It's quite different. It's very different. But having to adapt to science writing, I think it improved my writing in general as a whole, actually. But that was definitely a major transition that, I won't forget for sure.
So what are you doing right now? I know you said your research, what your research is focused on, but kind of what do your everyday responsibilities entail? Is there any classroom-based portion of your PhD, or are you mostly just doing research and focusing on your dissertation?
Yeah, I'll be approaching my third year. So by now I've finished my courses, which I'm happy.
Okay.
I'm happy about that. And now basically I just have to focus on publishing my own independent work. And so I work in a laboratory with all postdocs, which is not common for a lot of grad students. Usually you have all the grad students around, but for me it's really good because I can I can ask for advice, and I'm getting expert advice like for the questions that I ask. But every day. I mean, so we're also in the Department of Surgery. So I mean, I work with like mouse tissues and human tissues as well, because our work is very much clinical and translational. We're involved in clinical trials. So I go to the lab every day, and I work I do like in vivo experiments where you are doing an experiment that involves mice, or in vitro experiments where I'm working with like a test tube and like in a plate, like in the laboratory. And the whole idea is basically to understand certain types of mechanisms in T cells to strengthen them. So our lab, we focus, like I said before, we focus on cancer immunology, but specifically immunotherapy. So a lot of the new cancer drugs these days have actually been more immunotherapy drugs, and it's kind of revolutionized the way that we treat cancer, because it's more about strengthening your own body's ability to fight the disease. And actually in 2018, there was the guy that won the Nobel Prize in medicine. He won it for discoveries in immunotherapy, like understanding how immunology can help to fight cancer. And so this is basically the field that we're in. And I basically look at different machinery in T cells in the cancer setting to see specific genes and different proteins to see what mechanisms can strengthen these cells to fight cancer. Basically.
So how has your work been impacted by the pandemic? Like, so much, it sounds like so much of what you're doing has to be in person. Like, you have to have like your lab materials, you have to have access to your equipment and the mice when you're experimenting on. You can't like phone in your research. So how has that been working during this like period of social distancing?
Yeah, it was tough. I luckily, so they shut down research in like middle of March, pretty much. All the labs were shut down unless your lab was focusing on COVID-19, of course. But so luckily for me, I was in my own case, I was at the end of like an in vivo experiment, so I was able to collect like a last bit of data before this period of shutdown. But also luckily for me, before I started the PhD program, I got into computer programming and like bioinformatics and different computational tools that you can use to analyze biological data, and publicly available. For example, there's a website called PubMed.gov, which gives you access to. It's like a compendium of all the research that has been done, that's been published, and oftentimes they'll provide data sets that people can analyze and use toward their own hypotheses. And so I was able to still make progress toward my thesis, doing bioinformatics, because you can just, all I need is my laptop and service, and so yeah, so it set me back for sure. Like I said, a lot of people back, but at that time I was really grateful that I had the computational component.
Mm. So what about a lot of your colleagues who did not?
Yeah, so
They just, did their research just have to halt?
so yeah, so some people, yeah, for a lot of people it did. For some people, they were working on manuscripts maybe, or there were other things that you can do while you can't be in the laboratory. A lot of research is like downtime and kind of planning experiments, thinking about your next steps. Something else that I didn't mention was I was working on a textbook chapter for a medical textbook, and so it was basically a chapter on regulatory T cells.
Yeah.
And so, funny enough, I got the assignment in January, and then and then I was working on it. Then the pandemic happened, and it was actually kind of worked out because I had to just sit inside and work on this manuscript. But a lot of the science is like communication, writing. But it was tough for a lot of my colleagues for sure. People that have no computational, people that don't do anything computational, it was tough. I mean, a lot of people were just writing reviews and just reading a lot, basically, you know. But really, where science is going is bioinformatics in the.
No, I think we
Hello?
lost the signal there, but we're back.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. You're fine. And guys, just a reminder that we want this to be a conversation. Feel free to drop your questions for Mike in the comments, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. But Mike, you were talking about just kind of how the future of science is really in bioinformatics. So really this period of being able to do your work and continue your research remotely and digitally, it sounds like it's something that a lot of scientists either are shifting towards or should be shifting towards. Is that accurate?
Yeah, definitely. So, and this kind of ties in. So before I came here, I actually worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and there I became friends with a number of the grad students there, and that's actually kind of the way that I met Kamir, through mutual friends. But I remember the lab. Yeah, but the lab that I was in, it was an immunology lab, and there were a few bioinformaticians and statisticians that worked in the lab. But something that I just never forgot was that a lot of the wet lab scientists were always going to the bioinformaticians to make sense of their work. So they really kind of relied on the bioinformaticians. It's a really powerful tool. I mean, some of my colleagues, people that I knew in New York, some of the scientists that I worked with in New York, commented that this is like a golden age of science because we have so much data, but now not only do we have a lot of publicly available data and tools to collect this data, but we have tools to analyze it. And every day there's new software, new packages, new programming languages and different things that are being developed to analyze this. And so it's really definitely a golden age in science, but definitely kind of like a turning point where a lot of science is computational. I mean, science has always been statistics based, but now we can really get closer to what's happening in nature, I would say, maybe. So.
It's so funny that you mentioned how you met Kamir in this computational bioinformatics kind of science community. Can you talk a little bit about your journey to Minds of Jamaica? For those of you who don't know, Kamir Ricketts is the founder of Minds of Jamaica. He's also a PhD student in STEM. He's studying bioinformatics.
Yeah, so like I said, I met Kamir through mutual friends, but at the same time, so my family comes from Jamaica and Belize,
Oh,
and
wow.
and yeah, and and really, so I'm first generation American. You know, I have siblings and cousins, and we're all first generation American. We have we're the generation. Um, we're here living in the States, but for us, it's important to have a presence and a connection to where our predecessors came from, Jamaica and Belize. So I spend a lot of time in these places with my family. I still have family members that live in both places. Um, and when I learned about Mines of Jamaica, I saw an opportunity where I can take the things that I learned and all the things that I've gained in America, uh, and grateful for the fact that, grateful for my family coming here, immigrating here, giving me the opportunities to, uh, pursue these goals that I have. But when I saw Mines of Jamaica, I saw an opportunity where I can take these things that I've learned and give back, and it can be a part of me remaining connected to Jamaica in this way, and that's really important to me. And if I can do that through science and through mentorship and through academics, that makes me really happy.
And Vitamin D here asked, how did you become interested in immunology specifically? What was it about the field that kind of drew you to that line of work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first lab where I worked, it was a neuroscience lab, but
Mm-hmm.
we were actually studying neuroimmunology. Uh,
Okay.
to make a long story short, we were studying how the blood-brain barrier can break, and so your brain is surrounded by like basically a bag that protects the
Yeah.
brain from the rest of the body, and but in certain situations, in different diseases and different conditions, it can break your blood-brain barrier can break, and this leads to different like neurodegenerative diseases. So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
we were studying ways of treating neurodegenerative diseases through using immunomodulatory drugs.
Yeah.
And so before this, I hadn't um, really I hadn't expressed so much interest in immunology, but I thought that
Yeah.
my particular project was pretty cool, and after, I knew that, but so basically I wanted to study immunology because it's such a universal thing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's the most basic part of disease in medicine, I think. It's your own body's ability to protect itself from disease. Something else that I really enjoy about something that I really value in immunology is that I think that there are many things that we can do in our daily life to keep ourselves healthy rather than
Mm.
relying on really powerful drugs, like expensive and powerful drugs.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit to be known about preventative medicine, diet,
Oof.
all the things that we can do every day to strengthen our immune system so that our body can just fight diseases. And so this is something that's really universal. And it just, for me, it was kind of it was like a natural decision to go into that direction. So after that lab, I worked in Sloan Kettering at this immunology lab, and then now I'm here. Yeah.
So you kind of discovered your path into immunology seems to be a little bit more convoluted than most. So how did you cultivate mentors along the way? Especially because a lot of us like find our mentors in an academic space, and you kind of discovered STEM after you finished your undergraduate degrees, or this particular kind of pathway. So what
Right.
did that look like in terms of you finding like professional and academic mentors to guide you?
Yeah. So in undergrad, I so I made the decision to switch into the sciences, and people gave me good advice,
Yeah.
and I knew that it was going to be challenging, but I just did that. But once I arrived at the institution where I did my postbac, so I did this at Columbia University,
Okay.
and we were studying again. It was in the neuroscience department, and I was in the lab of a researcher named Dr. Ray Silver, and
Mm-hmm.
she's in the Department of Neuroscience at Columbia in Barnard. But one of her collaborators was a researcher named Dr. Carl Hart. So he was actually the first Black professor in the sciences at Columbia to have tenure.
Wow.
And yeah, and when I learned that, that was kind of shocking. But uh, and scientifically, intellectually, I collaborated with him as well. But he gave me a lot of advice about like challenging dogma, um, just kind of like following your curiosity, but having a measured uh, excitement about the things that you want to pursue. I suppose it was, for me, it was special to have him there because he was one of the, of course, one of the very, I mean, one of the only. Well, there were other black faculty in the in at the time in the neuroscience department, but he was definitely one of the very few. And to see the success that he had created for himself, and at the same time, he had a path that was non-traditional as well. So he was in the Navy. He actually was a like for some time he was he actually was a DJ, like a DJ.
I
Yes, you
love
know,
that. I love
yeah,
that.
and he actually, and he wrote a book about his path, and it was really, he had a lot of personal experiences that led him into science, and so for him to be in science was a personal choice. It wasn't something that was like expected. It wasn't something that just came next, you know. And so I really related with that, where it was something that he wanted to pursue and create for himself, you know. And so that so anyway, so my like professional relationship with him was really important. And as far as immunology, that was just taking my personal curiosities, and then it brought me where I am. But like as far as how I approach science, definitely he remains as an important influence.
So, what advice would you give to students who are maybe thinking of making an academic shift into STEM, but don't necessarily have that same sort of traditional background? Like, what would you tell them about like tangible things that they can do, steps that they can take to still be competitive, and especially when they're talking about potentially doing like a doctoral program?
Mhm. I would say that first of all, and I'm only speak. I guess I can only speak about the like American school system, but
Yeah,
early on, and this is in my experience, I think a lot of teachers discourage students or present science and math as hard and difficult and like
absolutely.
unattainable. And I think that that's like definitely a flaw. That's a flaw that needs to be corrected in this country. I know in Jamaica, I think it's different because like you know, so again, my dad is from Jamaica. He went to St. George's in Kingston, and I know that like the education system is different. And I think that it depends. I suppose I can't. Maybe I can't speak on it. It depends on the school that you go to. But I know that there's like, for example, the Caribbean's student companion book that like students were always given. I'm not sure if they're still given this book, but
Hmm.
but I think it seems to me like a lot of different schools in Jamaica prepare students in different ways
Hmm.
in basic knowledge than they do in the States. I think,
Yeah.
but I could be wrong. But basically, I would say that students that are pursuing STEM, um, you know, don't be intimidated by science. Most of the when we go to the laboratory is a place where you figure things out. I mean, people don't know everything that we're learning, everything that I'm doing is trying to understand something that's not known. So there's a period of time where you make mistakes, where you don't know you'll find results, and you'll design an experiment very really well, and you'll see results, and the results could be it's a true depiction of what's happening in nature, but you don't even know what it means, you know. And so you have to read the literature and understand. So it's like it's a constant learning. And so when I think it's a misconception to be intimidated by entering into the sciences. There's no like I think when people think of the sciences, they think of like authority figures saying that's a dumb question, or you don't know what you're talking about, or and it seems really elitist. But we're
Yeah.
studying things that happen, yeah. But we're studying things that happen in our bodies every day, and that's something else that actually drew me to the sciences. I mean, this is something, everything that I'm going into the lab to study is something that is right here inside of us every second of the day. And so it's like such a fundamental thing to learn. And I think that what I want to happen is the elitism of science. I want that to be decreased in some way. And
Yeah.
I think more people should pursue it. I mean, I didn't think when I was in high school, I didn't think I would be a scientist, but I'm totally like in that direction now, and I really enjoy it. And mostly because of the fact that it's studying things that is fundamental to us as individuals, like on an everyday basis. So the advice that I would give is like don't be intimidated. Um, and and like actually what science needs is a diversity of ideas and perspectives. So what it needs is more people, actually. So different types of people.
You know, Perfalo, I hope I'm saying his name correctly. Perfalo asked, what is something in your day-to-day experiences that you consider to be a small innovation that you're part of?
Um, I mean, so like, like I said, I mean, every day it's something new. We're pushing the boundary of what we know, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, like there's the romantic idea that in science, like you make a every day. Oh, you make a big discovery, and like this is brilliant. Oh, but it's but it's not like that. There's a lot of time where where things are confusing, but actually, I mean, but I would say in particular for me today, I had some results. Like I can just say in this particular situation, I had some new results for my project, and you realize that this is something that will be published once I put the story together. But I just found something I've just found something in nature that no one has ever published or anything, and it's completely something that I found, and it's something that's important for the clinic as well, Um, so you will, when you're in the sciences, and I'm just talking about the biomedical sciences. I mean, you have people that are physicists, that are engineers, that are chemists. They have their own type of workflow and milestones. But for us, we're working in a situation where we're trying to innovate in the clinic, and so yeah, every now and then there are innovations where I learn more about how T cells work. And again, I mean, T cells are one of the most important parts of your immune system. I mean, if we're talking about the COVID-19, for example, the T cell is the cell that will fight the disease. And so, I mean, so of course in the media, we're talking about like the vaccines and we're talking about antivirals, but I've been speaking with different colleagues, and this is something that, I mean, no one's talking about, and I don't know if this is going to take, if it's going to take off or anything, but in cancer immunology, we design like we design like immunomodulatory drugs that can fight cancer. And what these drugs do is, for example, they can strengthen the way that your T cells fight a cancer. So it's possible that in the future, where we have to live with like a COVID-19 or different viruses, these immunomodulatory drugs that can strengthen your T cells, your different types of immune cells against viruses. This might be something that will become more important as we live with viruses on a daily basis. Yeah. So there are ups and downs, definitely. Yeah.
I keep thinking of that quote from Grey's Anatomy, where every doctor is like, I'm going to change the face of medicine today.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe very rarely does that actually happen. It was more so just kind of like steps along the way. Like, this is a step forward. This is a step forward.
Definitely. This is why like PhDs take like 4 to 5, maybe 6 years, because like you have to basically, like, my goal is to publish multiple first author papers where it's my original research that is novel and that explains a biological phenomenon in the field of cancer immunology. And so like, but at the same time, so in a PhD program, right, when you enter into the program, you have to select the lab where you're going to do your thesis work. And this is a big step. And actually, I think when people are applying for PhD programs, this part is not emphasized that much because, you can have good grades, you can have experience, you can have the GRE score and whatever. But then you have to rotate in different labs, and basically you have to prove yourself. I mean, it's not like a hazing or anything, but you do have to prove yourself, and you have to justify why these people would help to fund you basically, and have you doing work in their laboratory. But fortunate for me, I joined a lab the lab that I joined, I really wanted to join this lab from before I applied for, this lab was the reason why I applied to Michigan. And and yeah, and this is a lab that does really good work. They publish really well. My PI has made a lot of important discoveries in the field over the years, and
Mhm.
so it's a combination of things where, sorry, it's a bit bright here. It's a combination of things where it depends on the group that you're in, but no one's going
Yeah.
to do your experiments for you. So you have to really push yourself and you have to motivate yourself. And for me, it's kind of like a marathon where I've run in a marathon, like a half marathon before, and it's like you have to run a long time, but you have people all around you running, and so you feel encouraged.
Hmm.
So when you're in that environment, you feel encouraged. So yeah. But it's also humbling. There's a lot of humility that goes
For
into the
sure.
work. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have that idea in your mind, like, yeah, I can make a big change for people,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you definitely have those moments. But there are many moments where you're humbled by by the things that you produce, like the data that you produce, and
Yeah.
all the things that happen. So yeah.
You know what I think is interesting, and I think this goes back to your point about the ways that we're conditioned to almost fear a lot of STEM related fields, and it's treated as something that is super inaccessible and very difficult to wrap your head around. I think that we kind of divide people into these categories as either like a logical kind of like either having like a mathematic or a scientific mind or a creative. And I think your path has like blown all of those stereotypes up and shown that none of that is true. None of that is accurate. Like you also kind of dabble in photography, right? In addition to like your writing, and am I making that up?
No, that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit? Can you talk a little bit about that and some of the things that you're doing even outside of your research?
Yeah, for sure. So so photography. So like in high. So I guess it started kind of in high school. I like
Yeah,
one of the things that I really like to do is make films with
yeah.
friends of mine, and so I guess that's where like my filmography, my like visual art came from, like
Hmm.
that period, and
Hmm.
then uh, and then I kind of dabbled with like Polaroid cameras. So I grew up like around the tri-state area. So in New York
Hmm.
City, you can go into one of those stores where they sell, and if you're in New York, if people have been to New York and you're in New York, you understand this. Like in Midtown, you have those stores where they sell like suitcases, microwaves, hubcaps, purses, and all these things. So it's
One
places
stop
like
shop.
that. Yeah, you know what I mean by Penn Station. So it's places like that where you can buy like Polaroid film. So
Yeah.
so anyway, I bought like a cheap camera once, and I started to play around with that.
Oh wow.
But actually, so in undergrad, I was able to study abroad, and
Where'd
I
you go?
originally met. Yeah, so I lived in Haifa, Israel, for a year as an undergrad, and actually, but I meant to go to Niger in Western Africa, but the program was canceled because at the
Oh, okay.
time there was like Al Qaeda. Uh, the State Department said that Al Qaeda was there, and so we couldn't go there. Basically, yeah. And so they said we can either go to Israel or Lebanon, and I chose to go to Israel. And
Hmm.
actually, interesting enough, when I arrived a couple weeks after I arrived, the Arab Spring started. So like this was the spring of 2011, and
Yeah.
so one day we were in Tel Aviv, and I was like at a flea market, and then I
Oh
bought
my
like
God.
this old busted. I bought this camera. It's like a basic like 35 millimeter camera,
Yeah.
and it's actually easy to find film. You like at a wall like in the States you have like convenience stores like Walgreens, CVS, whatever. You can find film there. I think you can
Yeah.
find these are just the basic rolls of film you can find. And so while I was there, I took pictures of all the places where I went and everything. And I didn't know if the camera worked still, actually. Like the flash was busted.
Yeah.
There was tape inside the camera. I didn't know if it worked. When I got back to the States, I developed all the film. And then I saw all the pictures that I had taken. And it was just like really beautiful. And it was just
Yeah.
all like just basic like street photography. And so it was after that experience that I really got into it. And it's just one of the things that I continue to do. I like to do. So my Instagram is actually based on photography. So as you can see, yeah. Twitter photo.
Yeah. So I know we're at the 30-minute mark. Did anyone have any final questions for Mike before we sign off for today? Definitely drop them in the chat. That's so crazy. Did you learn any Hebrew while you were there?
Yeah, I learned a bit of Hebrew and a little bit of Arabic too.
Okay. Okay, nice.
And it made me think that like the languages that I know that I speak the most are actually European languages, really.
Yes.
Except actually,
Yes.
so my mother's side of the family comes from Belize, specifically we're Garifuna. So we come from Dangriga, and so we're Garifuna people, and we have our own language and our own holidays, our own food customs. So when I traveled to Israel, it made me grateful for having the Garifuna background, because that I knew there they would go. I had friends that were in the university that could speak Arabic, that had family that they could speak to their family, and then they had their own language at home. And I realized, like, I have this too, and I speak French. I grew up. I took lessons in French, and I can speak fluent French, and then I speak English. And then but these are European language. And then when I went to I went to the Middle East. I was really interested in learning Arabic, but then at the same time, it reminded me that, like, I have my own home language that is like, it's not European. It's it's our own. So I think so. Anyway, I had a lot of different, like, experiences when I was there, but I would say that it definitely strengthened, how I connect to my own identity as I'm here in the States. So in the Western Hemisphere.
Absolutely. Mike, you have such an interesting story. Guys, if you want to connect with him more, and definitely part of the reason why we do this is so that our students and also other young professionals who are looking to make a career shift can learn more about kind of what our professional backgrounds are and where our areas of expertise lie. So definitely feel free to go to mindsofjamaica.com to, like, find out more about Mike or connect with him. Mike, we appreciate you for taking the time to talk to us today and share your story, just a little bit of what has been a very wild, like, super interesting life. So thanks so much.
Yeah. No, yeah. Thank you for having me. Definitely. I'm looking forward to the next time, for sure.
Someone just put down here, the coolest scientist. I agree. Bye.
All right. Goodbye. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.